leave your stuff, go! The fire's at the back, go!
Just minutes ago, a massive fire erupted on the edge of Jerusalem, throwing the city into chaos. Loud sirens echoed through the streets, accompanied by a strange, bright light and a terrifying ancient hum that Christians recognized with unease. The bustling streets, typically filled with traders and tourists, were suddenly overrun with panicking Christians desperate to escape. Why do many believers see this as the first sign of the Antichrist's arrival? Tune in to uncover why Jerusalem is now being called the death zone. Divine signs or environmental alarm. A bright light just appeared at the Dome of the Rock, leaving the locals in shock. This bright light made some people think that God was showing a sign, lighting up the old stones with heavenly light. Close by, the Western Wall was filled with the quiet prayers of many people, their voices mixing into one big hope for understanding and safety. Elsewhere in central Israel, strange sounds broke the peace. The area was filled with sounds that didn't make sense. Metal hits and spooky moans, along with what some thought were ghostly voices. These noises made people wonder if they were bad signs of things to come, like the scary trumpets from old stories about the end of the world. With summer coming, the heat made a bug problem worse. Locusts, loving the warm weather and helped by the drying of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, swarmed in huge numbers. This bug invasion reminded people of the changing weather around the rivers, making life harder for those who live there. Whether seen as signs from God, warnings about the environment, or just strange happenings, these events truly changed everyday life, becoming a part of how people in the city think about their sacred and deep history. Water issues in countries like Syria and Iraq are making things tenser, which could lead to fights that might affect Israel's safety. These problems could make many people leave their homes, leading to a big crisis with refugees. Israel might have to help these refugees and handle tough political problems. Israel is a place full of history, with stories that go back thousands of years. It's a place where big historical events and battles have happened, making every old stone and building a reminder of the past. Stories of prophets and miracles make Israel feel like a meeting place of history and the divine. Trumpet sounds make some believe that angels are announcing that the end times are close, a concept known from religious teachings. These happenings in Jerusalem have started a lot of talks and different ideas. For many believers, these signs are seen as direct actions from God, like the miracles in holy books. These signs give them hope and are seen as clues that Christ's return might be close, similar to other historical signs like the star that led to Bethlehem or the fire that guided the Israelites. While these signs bring hope to some, they also mark the start of a time full of challenges, as told in religious texts. The connection between these current events and old warnings suggests that these are part of a bigger plan, where God's influence still plays a role in human history. Every few years, the world gets ready for a new end-of-days scare, looking back at old predictions and seeing modern problems as signs of the world ending. This time, people are worried about wars, earthquakes, famines, diseases, and strange happenings in the sky, much like Luke wrote in the Bible, especially in chapter 21. These predictions often seem more like dramatic news headlines than deep insights. The writers of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, also talked about the world ending. Jesus, while sitting on the Mount of Olives with his followers, answered their questions about the end times. He talked about two big events: the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD and various disasters that would happen before his return, events that seem to repeat through every age since then. Now, some people are talking about the need to rebuild the Third Temple, as if building it could somehow get us ready for the end. They point to a series of disasters as signs that we should be ready for Jesus' return. This idea has been talked about a lot, suggesting that these signs should make us watchful and spiritually ready for what's to come, even though it always seems just out of reach. Let's explore different views on how the world might end. The divine acts of Jesus revisited. The debate over when the world will end divides people into different groups. Some people, called preterists, think all the big prophecies happened long ago when Jerusalem fell in the 1st century. Others, known as futurists, believe these events are still going to happen. Among the futurists, there are different ideas about when the rapture will occur. This is the time when believers are said to be taken up to heaven. Some say it will be before any big troubles start, giving believers an early way out. Others think it will happen during global troubles or even after, like a final test before being saved. These talks often mention the 70th week of Daniel, a 7-year period some think will start the final countdown. Whether these discussions help us understand better or just make the end times seem more complicated is still up for debate. As people keep making these predictions, the main point sometimes gets lost. Perhaps what's most important is how we live now, not when or how the world might end. But with all the excitement about prophecies, everyday life frequently gets overlooked, leaving us more distracted, worried, and maybe unprepared for what really lies ahead. Some think the rapture will happen midway through these 7 years, during a scary event called the abomination of desolation. These are known as mid-tribulation believers. Others, called post-tribulation believers, think it will occur at the end of the 7 years. There's also a group called pre-wrath believers, who say the rapture will happen after the halfway point, but before the worst times, which Jesus talked about. In all these beliefs, Jesus is seen as a perfect example of how to live a meaningful life. He is believed to bring hope, love, healing, and miracles, showing his importance to Christians not just as a leader but as God in human form. This belief comes from the New Testament, where he is described as the Word made flesh, the Savior, and the Messiah. Jesus also took care of people's emotional and spiritual pain. He forgave those who did wrong, supported the downhearted, and spoke about significant personal change. His actions are seen as signs of God's deep care for people, aimed at improving individual lives and society as a whole. This broad approach to healing, addressing physical, emotional, and spiritual issues, shows Jesus' lasting influence and portrays him as a continuous, powerful presence in his followers' lives. God's power isn't just for show. These events suggest that God's rule is coming to earth, showing total control over everything. This idea came up when Jesus' followers, curious and a bit worried, asked him about the end of the world. They were with him on a hill called the Mount of Olives and asked him privately about the signs and timing of his return. Jesus responded by listing disasters that would happen worldwide: famines, diseases, and earthquakes. His answer reflected older prophecies by Isaiah, who warned of terrible events hitting Jerusalem. Isaiah described a vivid scene where God punishes with loud noises, fierce storms, and fires. He said that at Jesus' return, people would be so scared by God's immense power that they would hide in rocks and caves. The story from Egypt, where Pharaoh managed a famine crisis following Joseph's advice from a dream about 7 good years, followed by 7 bad ones, shows a similar challenge. Joseph's smart planning by storing food helped not only his family, but also the entire nation survive tough times. This pattern of good times followed by difficulties, guided by divine warnings and human responses, is a recurring theme. These tales and prophecies serve as both alerts and tests. They act as a divine warning system, urging leaders and nations to act wisely in anticipation of upcoming disasters. They also test the moral and leadership abilities of those in power, challenging them to manage crises effectively. The recurring themes suggest a purposeful design where every disaster also offers a chance for wise leadership and recovery. Thus, these apocalyptic visions are not just warnings, but also lessons in managing resources and governing wisely, encouraging leaders to prepare for and mitigate the impacts of inevitable tough times. Now see how today's leaders shape our views on global crises. The 7 trumpets of change. Joseph and Pharaoh were key figures in their time, much like today's leaders such as Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, who proposes ideas like the Great Reset. This concept suggests a future where personal possessions are given up for the community's benefit, mirroring how ancient Egyptians relied on Pharaoh. Currently, Some influential people manipulate shortages in things like energy or food to push the masses towards specific ideologies, creating a dependency similar to old societal structures. Despite these manipulations, many hold on to the belief that a divine power oversees human events. This belief is grounded in religious stories, like the biblical tale of God freeing Israel from slavery. These old stories connect to modern interpretations of scriptures that predict global disasters. For instance, Revelation describes end-of-the-world events marked by widespread hunger and illness, which some see as current global issues being signs from above. Luke's writings add to this by describing diseases and strange sky events that cause fear. These are often connected to today's happenings as possible fulfillments of these old warnings, pushing people to think about life's fleeting nature and the importance of being spiritually prepared for what many believe will be the world's final events. The term pestilence in Matthew highlights this, showing a deadly disease as a sign of even tougher times ahead, similar to how labor pains signal the start of childbirth. This idea of birth pains is used to describe a series of disasters, wars, famines, and earthquakes that mark the beginning of even harder times. Such biblical references are often linked with the growth of messianic congregations in Israel, which some believe fulfills Jesus' prediction of his return, depending on the Jewish people welcoming him. The growing interest in this message within Israel increases excitement among believers about these prophetic times. The book of Revelation stands out with its image of 7 angels, each with a trumpet, signaling major events that are meant to reshape the world. These trumpets are symbols of significant changes set in motion by divine command, highlighting scenarios where heavenly actions directly affect what happens on earth. Discussing these prophetic interpretations often swings between hope inspired by faith and critical analysis. This is especially true when linking biblical prophecies to current events, where it's hard to tell apart divine warnings from mere coincidences. As these discussions unfold, they continue religious debates and show a wider human effort to find meaning amid global changes. The first 4 trumpets herald a series of catastrophic events. Each trumpet sound corresponds to a disaster, from massive natural upheavals to the downfall of powerful empires. These calamities serve as stark reminders of human vulnerability and the overarching power of the divine. Far from random, these events challenge the human perception of control, reinforcing the notion that it is not humans, but God, who holds ultimate authority. As the narrative unfolds, the subsequent 3 trumpets, known as the woes, introduce even graver consequences. With the sounding of the 5th trumpet, a terrifying abyss is unsealed, unleashing locust-like creatures upon those not under God's protection. This plague targets not just the body, but the spirit, urging a deep introspection on moral living and the consequences of spiritual neglect. The 6th trumpet brings forth a vast army, capable of immense destruction. This force annihilates a large portion of humanity, reflecting the dire consequences of relentless conflict and cruelty. This trumpet, like its predecessors, carries a dual message. It is a grim reflection of humanity's darker tendencies and a clarion call for redemption and change before it is too late. Anticipation mounts as the narrative approaches the 7th and final trumpet. For believers, this event is not merely another catastrophe but the herald of God's eternal dominion. What precedes this final trumpet has been tumultuous, yet it is awaited with eagerness. It signifies the inauguration of a divine kingdom, an era of justice and peace promised to last forever. Each trumpet in the book of Revelation is more than a harbinger of doom. It represents a step in a transformative of faith. These divine signals are calls to reflection, urging an examination of life's fleeting nature and the permanence of what lies beyond. They are not relics from an ancient text, but vibrant, resonant messages of divine promise and renewal. These ancient echoes are meant to stir the soul, prompting a reassessment of personal values and behaviors. Each trumpet's call is an invitation to live in accordance with divine will, preparing for a profound transformation under God's eternal rule. This call to action is urgent, encouraging a readiness for the return of Christ. The trumpets serve as a reminder that life on earth is temporary and that a grander divine reality awaits. Through this narrative, the echoes of the trumpets reach across centuries, urging a deeper understanding of divine expectations and the ultimate redemption of all things under God's sovereign hand. As the story of the trumpets unfolds, it challenges each person to reflect on their spiritual, urging them to align more closely with divine principles and prepare for the momentous events prophesied to shape the culmination of history. Among these, the sixth trumpet stands out. It does not just cause disruption, it announces the arrival of an angel, signaling a moment full of meaning that combines chaos with a divine signal. Revelation chapter 9 verses 13 to 21 highlights this moment as the release of a huge army from the river Euphrates, tasked with eliminating a third of humanity. This event serves as a harsh reminder of the severe consequences of our choices. At a critical moment, the sudden appearance of an angel seemed to be a divine intervention connecting heaven and earth. This event underscored the intertwined destinies of all beings. The blast of the sixth trumpet served not merely as a warning of imminent danger, but as a profound call to introspection. It urged a shift in focus from mundane daily worries to larger, more significant matters. The trumpet's echo raised essential questions about humanity's attentiveness to spiritual teachings and preparedness to confront the consequences of its deeds. It challenged everyone to ponder deeply whether they were truly absorbing the wisdom of sacred texts and if they were equipped to handle the repercussions of their actions. This divine occurrence was a reminder that celestial forces were actively involved, watching and influencing the course of human events. Next, we link ancient prophecies with today's global challenges. The sound of trumpets in today's world. The trumpet's sound becomes more than an alarm, it becomes a spiritual challenge. It prompts us to evaluate our moral and ethical standings, encouraging us to aim for what is spiritually right. These trumpets signify important, though invisible forces at play, reminding us of our roles in a much larger story than our own lives. The connection between ancient trumpet blasts and today's spiritual and real-world challenges acts as a bridge between the old and the new, the spiritual and the everyday. It shows that the major themes of the book of Revelation, judgment, redemption, and the battle between good and evil, are not just old stories, but are critically important today. They are deeply integrated into our lives, urging us to engage fully with their teachings. The idea of the Last Judgment taking place in Jerusalem unites Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, despite their different beliefs about the end times. All agree that Jerusalem will be central to the final events. Until then, Jerusalem stands as more than just a city. It's a symbol of divine presence and a reminder of our spiritual responsibilities, serving as a concrete reminder of the sacred in our everyday world. This ongoing relevance of ancient prophecies urges us to live with a consciousness that looks beyond the here and now, to consider matters of cosmic importance and lasting impact. Jesus openly discussed the future destruction of Jerusalem and his return in glory. During the day, he taught at the temple, and as evening came, he led his disciples to the Mount of Olives. Overlooking the grand temple, still under construction after 46 years, he shockingly claimed that soon, not a single stone would stand on another. It would be completely torn down. This bold statement, recorded in Luke chapter 21 verse 56, hinted at not just a physical demolition, but widespread change. Jesus encouraged his followers to remain strong and keep their faith, even in hard times. He explained that for believers, death was just a beginning of something far better. These teachings were supposed to comfort those facing difficulties, reinforcing the idea that his return was near, as mentioned in Matthew chapter 24 verse 31. This message was especially relevant during a severe persecution that forced early Christians out of Jerusalem, spreading them across Judea and Samaria, as described in Acts chapter 8 verse 1. These difficult times also brought teachings of hope in Matthew. The 22nd verse, often seen as referencing the rapture, suggested a type of rescue where believers would be saved from danger. The Greek word translated as saved here means moving from danger to safety, emphasizing a promise of protection from God during severe trials. Jesus' blend of prediction and reassurance, delivered clearly, acted both as an alert and a source of comfort. He advised his followers to escape the impending disaster, combining practical advice with spiritual promises. His words aimed not just to predict harsh realities, but to prepare his followers for them, fostering a belief in eventual rescue and safety through divine help. This combination of dire warnings and hopeful messages captures the core of Jesus' teachings during those critical days, highlighting the deep connection between forewarning and faith that marked his ministry. The phrase city, immediately Matthew 2:411-15528, seems to be a mistake, as it doesn't fit smoothly into the rest of the discussion. The text describes different strategies for a dramatic future where people face a so-called Antichrist. The first strategy suggests boldly facing these dark forces, like something out of a movie. Some propose forming resistance camps to fight back. Realistically, these camps would be easy targets for any powerful enemy. There are mixed messages about whether to fight or turn the other cheek, as told in historical texts. Following the example of figures like Stephen, who favored love over revenge, seems noble but perhaps impractical in a crisis. The second strategy is to flee to the countryside, imagining a simpler life away from cities. However, if everyone decides to escape at the same time, it could lead to chaos. The dream of a quiet life in nature would be ruined by too many people, drones, and constant surveillance. The last strategy suggests doing nothing but waiting for divine help. It's a peaceful option, but basically involves sitting back and hoping for a miracle. Each strategy, while different, shows desperation and a bit of wishful thinking, ignoring practical, real-world solutions for a global disaster scenario. They range from aggressive action to complete passivity, each underestimating the real challenges and practicalities needed in such dire situations. The discussion is engaging, but lacks a focus on the tough realities of survival and the necessary steps that would really matter. A world where uncertainty often clouds the horizon, there are those who persistently seek guidance from a higher power, trusting that an omnipotent force watches over them. This belief serves as a beacon during the darkest hours, purportedly when divine intervention is most apparent. The notion of forming robust Christian communities becomes appealing as individuals grapple with life's challenges. Such communities promise a network of support that could be indispensable during difficult times. These communities encourage their members to move forward, not in fear, but with hearts swelling with hope. They look forward to an eventual celestial reunion, where they believe they will be eternally transformed by divine love. In the meantime, they strive to live lives that reflect the splendor of their awaited future, spreading hope and illustrating that better days lie ahead. They share stories of those among them who have endured hardships, believing these experiences to be touched by divine grace. The tales are many and varied. They speak of ordinary individuals who have encountered profound challenges and emerged not only unscathed but fortified, their faith deepened. Such narratives serve as a source of inspiration, purportedly offering healing and motivation to strive for greater heights. The lesson imparted is one of enduring faith, a faith that has buttressed countless through the ages, now urged to guide them toward more ardent devotion and altruism. Finally, discover how faith communities find hope in tough times, navigating life's divine challenges. As these stories are shared, new narratives of resilience and optimism are crafted. Members of these communities weave rich stories, filled with the vibrancy of collective human spirit and mutual support. They portray the strength of shared beliefs and the benefits of standing together in times of need. These are stories of endurance and transformation, highlighting the power of belief and the impact of communal support. Each story, each life touched by what is believed to be a brush with the divine, contributes to a larger tapestry, a narrative of human tenacity and the quest for something greater. Through their collective efforts, these communities aim to establish a legacy of hope and perseverance, demonstrating the profound effect of communal faith and the transformative power of collective action. The stories speak of transforming life's darkest moments into shining examples of faith, presenting each challenge as an opportunity to triumph through the teachings of Christ. They serve as a beacon of inspiration, urging followers to emulate the resilience of those who have endured and overcome adversity before them. The concept of a faith family is frequently invoked, a worldwide community bound not by familial ties, but by the enduring promises of God. In a world rife with uncertainty, the push to anchor one's life in faith and adhere to biblical teachings is portrayed as not just beneficial, but essential. This urgent call to live by faith is emphasized as being more critical now than ever. It encourages adherents to look beyond the mundane day-to-day existence and focus on an eternal horizon, preparing themselves for a heavenly reward promised to those who walk faithfully in the divine path. One is asked to imagine a life meticulously aligned with every divine law, where every decision and action is measured against religious standards. The aim is clear: to live in perfect harmony with a heavenly script, hoping for the celestial rewards that are often spoken of, but remain unseen. This narrative taps into a deep desire for stability against life's unpredictability, offering a framework that not only provides guidance, but promises spiritual security. However, this raises questions about the feasibility of basing one's entire life on ancient doctrines in return for promises that are grand but intangible. Each hardship is portrayed as a necessary step on the spiritual elevation, a narrative that simplifies and repackages the complexities of human suffering as mere prerequisites for divine favor. While this perspective offers comfort, it might also appear to some as an oversimplified view of a reality that is inherently random and often unforgiving. As modern challenges loom large, the exhortation to live a life dictated by faith continues to resonate loudly within the community of believers. Yet, this call often glosses over the tangible, sometimes harsh realities of such a commitment, choosing instead to highlight the idealized outcomes rather than the gritty, day-to-day struggles that accompany such a lifestyle. This selective portrayal fosters an alluring yet potentially unrealistic vision of life, urging followers to adhere to a set of rules that might not always accommodate the intricate dilemmas of contemporary existence. The stories, while uplifting, demand a life of strict adherence to scriptural commands, promising divine aid and eternal rewards for those who comply. This creates a compelling but perhaps impractical blueprint for living, as the faith required typically calls for a suspension of personal judgment in favor of divine guidance, a leap not everyone is prepared to make. Let's face it, the high ideals of love, justice, and mercy from sacred scriptures are often praised as the basis for a perfect community. But despite being talked about a lot, these principles hardly ever turn into real actions. The idea that such a community is not just a distant dream, but something we can actually achieve, seems overly optimistic in today's complex world. The gospel and Christ's life are said to show us how to live by these ideals. But it's debatable how well this really works in changing society. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 8 and 10 tells us that we've moved from darkness to light and urges us to live as children of light, saying, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and encourages us to figure out what pleases the Lord." This message to find God's wishes not just through rituals, but through true devotion that shows in real actions sounds uplifting, but putting it into practice is complicated by human weaknesses and different ways of understanding. The passage talks about the big changes that come from following the Beatitudes, especially the peacemakers who are called children of God. It paints peacemaking as a miraculous fix to a world full of conflict. It prompts us to bridge gaps and plant seeds of reconciliation, as if each small peace effort could directly lead us closer to heaven and fulfill our purpose as Christ's followers. However, a more critical view might see this as a too simple solution for deep, ongoing conflicts that need more than just good intentions and small acts of kindness. The call to be beacons of hope and to light up the darkness might seem like a nice metaphor, but one might wonder how effective these lighted paths are when the world continues to struggle with unfairness, inequality, and sorrow. The story urges us as individuals to fight against the darkness, armed only with goodness, righteousness, and truth. But realistically, how much can this truly accomplish against systemic problems that require a collective effort, not just individual actions? Indeed, the constant urging to figure out what pleases God and to live by these ageless ideals through genuine devotion, while poetic, often lacks practical, actionable plans that lead to real change. Instead, the flowery language might offer comfort or a sense of purpose to some, while others remain doubtful about its practical impact. The true challenge is not just in imagining or starting acts of kindness and justice, but in keeping these efforts going in a world that often seems resistant to such changes. Do you believe that religious teachings effectively inspire lasting positive change, or are they too abstract? Like, comment, and subscribe to join the conversation and share your thoughts.